Canadian members of Parliament will get their yearly pay raise on April 1st, which is the same day that this same government will hike the carbon tax meant to somehow save the planet. And while I wish that this were just a sick April Fool's Day joke, the joke seems like it's actually on the Canadians who are struggling and who continually oppose more funding to an increasingly out of touch and fiscally irresponsible bureaucracy.
The truth is, we can't fully compensate every single Canadian for all of the effects of inflation or for elevated interest rates. To do so would only make inflation worse and force rates higher for longer. Canadians are smart. Everyone here is smart. So I know you understand that.
The Justin Trudeau Liberals continue to sit up in their ivory towers while us plebs suffer the devastating fallout of their failed pandemic response plans, including the very real looming recession seen as Canadians struggle to feed their families and heat their homes amid unprecedented inflation that many economists warned about when hysterical global supply chain shutdowns were sanctioned by governments to stop the spread of a seasonal respiratory virus.
And what I heard from all of our counterparts around the world is that this is something that the economies of the world, particularly the industrialized economies, are experiencing. It comes down to the fact that it turns out that it is a lot easier to shut down the world economy than to open it back up. And we are opening it back up. That is great. But there is some unevenness, there are some hiccups, there are supply chain issues.
And yet this April 1st yearly pay hike will be the fourth time that MPs showed that they don't care about the havoc that they wreaked on the livelihoods of everyday Canadians. Instead, they have continued to receive their self-sanctioned pay raises since the COVID pandemic was declared in March 2020.
Mr. Speaker, across the country, we've seen record job growth. We've seen record number of Canadians lifted out of poverty. We've seen investments to fight climate change that have put more money in people's pockets because we know Canadians are struggling. And that's why we continue to step up.
It's why we are launching an immediate petition campaign at stopthepayhike.com. At that website, you can sign our petition aimed at Deputy Prime Minister and the Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland to send her an email calling on her to respect the financial dignity of hardworking, everyday Canadians and pause this annual pay raise amid extraordinary financial turmoil.
Again, let me just be very clear, really about two things. I would not claim that our government has been perfect in anything. No government is, and we haven't been perfect in our support for Ukraine.
Leader of the opposition party, Pierre Poilievre, calls the newly released 2023 federal budget an attack on the paychecks of hard-working Canadians. Have a listen.
Budget by the costly coalition of the NDP and Liberals is a full frontal attack on the paychecks of hard-working Canadians. It equals $4,200 per family in new government spending. That's more inflation, more taxes, and more costs for everyday people. There's no common sense. This is an attack on the hardworking people of this country, and that is why Conservatives will be voting no. Instead, we will vote to bring home powerful paychecks, bring home lower costs, and bring homes that people can afford.
Prior to the release of this budget, Franco Terrazzano, director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, called on the feds to stop the parliamentary pay raise at a press conference on Parliament Hill. Check that out.
Stopping a pay raise isn't rocket science, especially when Canadians overwhelmingly oppose it. The feds stopped MP pay raises between 2010 and 2013 in response to the 08-09 recession. BC recently froze pay for MLAs. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston recalled the legislature, froze MLA pay, and then cut his own pay by $11,000. Here in Ottawa, backbench MPs currently collect a $189,500 salary. Trudeau collects a $379,000 salary from taxpayers. MPs don't deserve another raise, and MPs don't need another raise from their constituents who are struggling to fill the fridge. MPs especially don't deserve a raise when they make life unaffordable with tax hikes.
After the budget released, Terrazzano criticized Freeland for spending $18 billion, yes, that's a B, over her own budget in 2022, and is now increasing spending in 2023 by an additional $20 billion. According to the National Post, the latest budget projects a $43 billion deficit in 2022-2023 that will gradually tumble to $14 billion by 2028, a far cry from the projections in the 2022 fall economic statement. The budget predicts a $175 billion deficit over the next 6 years. Apparently, you have to spend money to save it if you're Canada's finance minister, who authored a book about the rise of the super rich and the fall of, well, everyone else, as we watch the disappearance of the middle class basically happen right before our eyes. We have more Canadians using food banks than ever before, and the increase isn't showing any sign of letting up anytime soon, as the stats show that grocery prices continue to outpace inflation. The Fraser Institute reported that the average Canadian family currently pays 45.2% of its income to the federal, provincial, and local governments. And of that, 75% of Canadians polled feel that the average family is being overtaxed by these same governments. A recent Ledger poll confirmed that 80% of Canadians do not support this annual pay raise, yet these out-of-touch Liberals have decided that in order to combat the suffering of everyday Canadians at the helm of government mismanagement, the same government must give itself a yearly raise on the same day that they hike the infamously ridiculous carbon tax and institute additional taxes on things like alcohol.
You know, I spoke to you earlier about our price on pollution. That's a very powerful market-based mechanism. It's going up every single year, and we increased it this year, even in the face of higher inflation. And to me, that shows a meaningful commitment.
Tell Chrystia Freeland no at stopthepayhike.com. That is, if they even show up to work. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. If you're a fed-up Canadian taxpayer and want to exercise your democratic voice, then you can sign our petition to Deputy Prime Minister and Federal Minister of Finance Chrystia Freeland to immediately freeze this pay raise at stopthepayhike.com. That's stopthepayhike.com.